Call the roll, please.
Senator Carpenter, Senator Caslin, Senator Embry.
Present in the 6th Senate District.
Thank you. Senator Harper Angel.
Present while traveling.
Thank you. Senator Schickel. Senator Southworth.
Here in the room.
Senator Turner. Senator Webb. Senator Westerfield. Senator Wheeler. Representative Blanton.
Present in the room.
Representative Bowling. Here in the room. Representative Bridges. Here in the room. Representative Birch. Here in the room. Representative Cantrell. Representative Dossett. Representative Dotson.
Present.
Representative Duplessis. Representative Flannery.
Present in the room.
Representative Fugate.
Present in the room.
Representative Johnson.
Present in the room.
Representative Kirk McCormick.
Present in the room.
Representative Marzian. Representative Miles. Representative Givens Prunty.
Present in the room.
Representative Scott. Representative Stevenson.
Present in the district.
Thank you. Representative Wesley.
In the room.
Representative White. Chair
Present traveling.
Thank you, Representative. Chair Smith. And Chair Gooch.
Present in the room. Okay, we do have a quorum. We're duly authorized to do business. We need to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Do we have a motion?
I motion.
Motion second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed by like sign. The meetings are approved. Well, welcome everyone to what probably will be the last meeting of this interim, I would guess. We've had a lot of good meetings, and so I see Representative Miles has joined us.
But then it's not like we're high-fiving going down the hall because, again, everybody...
Okay. We asked that someone mute your phone. Okay. The first item on the agenda, we're going to have a Kent Chandler, Chair of the Public Service Commission, is going to talk about the resource adequacy in the Commonwealth and the United States, as I guess it relates to electricity grid, and energy. Welcome, Kent.
Thank you, Chairman Gooch and Chair Smith, and your co-chair today. Thank you all for having me. See if that works. All right. As Chairman Gooch said, my name is Kent Chandler. I'm the chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission. During this presentation, I'm speaking for myself and not on behalf of the commission or any other commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to be here today and talk to you about this. Today's presentation is primarily related to the interplay between utility reliability and renewables or intermittent resources. Frankly, this is a subject that, especially for this committee, I'd prefer to dedicate at least a half a day to, though today, after speaking with Chairman Gooch, I'm going to spend about 15 minutes on it. I should have time, though, after the presentation for some questions, and as always, anytime you or any of your staff would like to discuss this or other topics related to the Public Service Commission, I'd be happy to come speak with you or answer any questions you may have. Most of you know what the Public Service Commission is and what it does. We're a 3-member independent agency that regulates non-municipal utilities across the Commonwealth. We do not regulate cooperatives that receive power from the Tennessee Valley Authority. The bedrock of retail utility regulation in the state is that utilities may only charge rates that are fair, just, and reasonable, and the utilities are under an obligation to provide adequate, efficient, and reasonable service. Everything we talk about today is underpinned by these two statutory directives. According to NERC, which is the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, whose mission statement is to ensure the reliability of the North American bulk power system, reliability is the ability of the electricity system to supply aggregate electric power and energy to meet the requirements of consumers at all times, taking into account scheduled and unscheduled outages of system components. Primarily what I'll be discussing today is the reliability of the bulk electric system, not necessarily the reliability of whether the lights turn on when you flip the switch at home. This will be about are electrons available and where and when any single time that they're demanded. So who is responsible for ensuring reliability? The lawyer answer, and in this case the most correct one, is it depends. In Kentucky, it starts with the utility. Here, we depend primarily on vertically integrated investor-owned utilities, or we have member-owned cooperatives who in turn own generation and transmission cooperatives. These setups are referred to as vertically integrated because they perform the generation, transmission, and distribution functions within their own companies or within a tight structure. Other states, and I've listed a few here, have broken out these functions amongst different non-aligned companies. Further, in some other states, customers can choose the source of their generation. Here in Kentucky, the generation is chosen by the utility that ultimately provides a customer the delivery service. Service territories for utilities in Kentucky are defined, so the utility serving customers in an area are static. Due to the structure and monopoly status of utilities in Kentucky, by legislative directive, the Public Service Commission regulates utilities in this state in a further attempt to ensure reliability. We do this through reviewing capital spending, but primarily it's through a process called an Integrated Resource Plan, or IRP. IRPs are filed every 3 years, look out 15 years, and is intended to ensure adequate resources and systems for reliability. I will have more on IRPs later. There is also wholesale reliability assurance, sometimes referred to as resource adequacy. For today's presentation, reliability and resource adequacy are effectively synonymous. These wholesale rules emanate from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC. FERC is the wholesale gas and power regulator, regulating interstate electricity, while the Public Service Commission is the retail regulator, focusing on end-use regulation. NERC, the North American Electricity Energy Reliability Corporation, is granted authority to set reliability requirements by FERC. Finally, FERC also regulates RTOs and ISOs. I didn't put them on here, but RTOs are regional transmission organizations, and ISOs are independent system operators. For today's presentation, I'll refer to both as just RTOs. RTOs are basically large accumulations of transmission facilities that span multiple states or regions. These RTOs coordinate transmission operations and generation dispatch, as well as operate wholesale electricity markets. For those states that are deregulated or not vertically integrated, instead of being able to depend on your utility and retail regulator for reliability, these states depend almost exclusively on the RTOs and their markets to ensure resource adequacy. Again, I'll have more on RTO resource adequacy in a moment. Here's a map of the United States that shows the RTOs plus Texas. ERCOT, the grid operator in Texas, is not an RTO and is not regulated by FERC, primarily because ERCOT does not operate in interstate commerce. Kentucky has 4 utilities in RTOs. Kentucky Power, East Kentucky Power, and Duke Kentucky help form PJM in the east. Big Rivers is a member of MISO in the west. LG&E and KU were founding members of MISO, but no longer participate in an RTO. One thing I hope you take away from today is that ensuring resource adequacy and reliability is harder today than it was in the past. With that being said, today and in the near future, Kentucky is in a fairly good position. Some of the items that complicate reliability planning going forward are increasing technological advancements and the reduction of costs of new types of resources that, frankly, act different than resources we previously planned with. Some areas of the country are having to address reliability concerns driven by their own resource demands, and some challenges that are having to be addressed are driven by corporate or economic development demands. A perfect example of that is Big Rivers and the Nucor expansion in Brandenburg. You heard from Bob Berry last month about how Big Rivers was adding about 260 megawatts of solar to the system, and a portion of that will be dedicated to Nucor. Corporate customers like Nucor are increasingly demanding resources like solar because they are low cost, fixed price, and carbon free. My understanding is that Big Rivers plans to have about a third of its generation dedicated to renewables, broken out between solar and hydro, by 2030, along with about a third of its system as natural gas and another third as coal. Coming back to the integrated resource plans, or IRPs, that we conduct here in Kentucky. These are performed under requirements and PSC regulations and include information on load forecasts, environmental compliance obligations, generation retirement plans, transmission constraints, new generation needs, amongst a significant number of other items. These are complicated plans. I looked last night. LG&E and KU filed theirs about a week or 2 weeks ago, and the public version they filed was in excess of 250 pages. The plans are based on 15-year planning horizons and ultimately help serve as a guide to ensure long-term reliability. Interveners are able to participate, and extensive discovery is conducted by parties and commission staff. We have had and intend on continue to have evidentiary hearings on these cases. As the PSC has become resource constrained in the past 15 years, reviews of IRPs have taken a backseat to other matters that have defined statutory timeframes. A few years ago, the Commission reiterated its commitment to ensure these cases are treated as the serious matters that they represent. As long as I'm at the PSC, utilities can expect a greater focus on IRPs given their ultimate importance. Utilities don't necessarily have to strictly follow the plans they come up with in their IRPs as they choose the resources to serve customers, but a deviation from the IRP ordinarily demands a detailed explanation. Resource adequacy at the wholesale level is a whole different world. There is no command and control resource planning dictated by utilities and firm regulatory processes. Instead, RTOs primarily depend on markets to ensure reliability. For instance, the PJM market intends on starting greater reserve pricing. As scarcity of energy in high demand times increases, so does the price. This helps incent generators to make themselves available, as well as sends a price signals to customers to help reduce demand. Additionally, PJM and MISO both have capacity markets to help provide some sort of payment to ensure reliable capacity is there when it is most needed. Although they both have capacity markets, PJM's is really head and shoulders above MISO's for driving capacity and reliability. Capacity markets help ensure generators are paid enough so that they are available in times of high demand, even if they don't get to make much money throughout the year selling electricity. In furtherance of ensuring reliability, both PJM and MISO have also instituted a way to determine the reliability contribution of intermittent or limited duration resources. These resources often include wind, solar, or even short duration batteries. Historically, these types of resources have merely been given capacity D-rates, referred to as capacity factors. Capacity factor is the amount of electricity produced by a resource over a time period as a percentage of the total amount of electricity that that facility could have produced had it run at full capacity. An easy example is a 10 megawatt gas unit that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 10 megawatts, at a full 10 megawatts. The capacity factor of that facility for that week would be 100%. If it ran at 5 megawatt output for the entire week, its capacity factor would be 50%. For capacity planning and capacity markets, intermittent resources were previously just given capacity factors for a whole type of generation. So, in the way past, utility planners may say, well, solar has a 16% capacity factor and wind has a 25% capacity factor. So if we're going to replace a coal plant with wind, we'll just use 4 times as much nameplate wind as we would coal. That's clearly flawed. PJM and MISO have recently instituted, though, an ELCC, or Effective Load Carrying Capability, to replace this outdated capacity factor regime for limited duration resources. This is a much better planning tool for intermittent resources. ELCC now uses a resource type's expected contribution to meet system demand in order to determine how much capacity to attribute to it. If you had a fictional system that year-round had high demand in the middle of the night, but almost no demand in the daytime, the ELCC for solar would be almost nothing. Compare that, however, to California. In the early afternoon, you have so much solar that prices go into the tank. Yet none of that solar is available to meet system demand in the late afternoon as people return home. If California used a pure ELCC and had a capacity market like PJM, few people would build solar because ELCC would be in the single digits and you wouldn't get any money from those capacity payments. Effectively, ELCC determines how much reliability a resource can provide, and you only pay for that much reliability and capacity. I don't mean to dwell on details, but I do want to convey these types of planning changes that are being made in response to the dynamic changes that are occurring. Here are a few things that the Public Service Commission, retail regulators, or even market operators at the RTOs can do to adapt and help ensure reliable bulk electric systems. 1, we can make the IRP process better. We need more information and greater detail on system planning, all the way down to the distribution system. We can also put more focus on resources contribution to serving customers. If you have a gas plant that in high demand can't get fuel because the local gas company prioritizes its own needs over that generator, why should that gas plant be paid for capacity that it can't provide when it's most needed? We also need to continue to study the interaction between gas and electricity, especially given the increasing trend of natural gas as a fuel for electricity. We also need better modeling. We need to be figuring out what we're missing, what we're doing wrong, and where our load forecasts have been incorrect in the past. One thing I also want to make sure I mention today is just to talk about what resources are available for our utilities when they are what can they consider in order to meet future needs. These could be due to expanded growth or due to other generation retirements that require replacement. Wind and solar are increasingly cheaper and cheaper, but they're not perfect, and they provide their own planning challenges here in Kentucky. Nuclear has never really been seriously discussed in Kentucky as a resource in the years that I've been doing this. Cost and waste storage are 2 reasons why. That may change given the innovations made with advanced reactor and small modular facilities. Natural gas. Models often choose natural gas as the least cost resource, but gas-electric coordination and the risk of building gas generally becomes larger conversations to have each year. For instance, given the push for low or no carbon resources, environmental requirements may cause the retirement of fossil generation, either gas or coal, before those plants are fully depreciated. This causes customers to pay more than they would otherwise, and is a risk that we at least have to take under consideration when making generation decisions. Energy efficiency is great, but all it does is reduce demand. It does not create electrons. Batteries could be a game changer and may work in certain instances today. With that, they're expensive and they're relatively short duration. A few takeaways. I've already mentioned the first one. The second one here, Kentucky is getting the best of both worlds. We're getting cheap power from markets on any given day, but we're ensuring reliability and resource adequacy as standalone entities and utilities. On that subject, the third item. Some Kentucky utilities have indicated a preference, intent, or thought about leaning on the markets for resource adequacy. The Public Service Commission, at least 3 times in the past year, has explicitly said that that was something that we are not going to let happen. At least in one of those times, we said that Kentucky utilities, regardless of their participation in a market, must be planning to meet their own customers' needs with their own resources. Personally, I think that's best for Kentucky customers in the long term. Finally, one takeaway is that we have to stay engaged. Thorough proceedings at the Public Service Commission and involvement in the matters by the PSC at FERC and RTO levels are requirements these days. We're doing our best to dedicate commissioner and commission staff time to these items, but we have about half the employees we had 20 years ago. Investor-owned utilities file rate cases about twice as frequent as they used to in the past, and FERC and RTO matters are extremely involved and complicated. Staffing resources at the Public Service Commission are fairly strained. With that being said, given the importance of these topics, as long as I'm at the Commission, these issues will not be taking a back seat. I'd be happy, Chairman, to answer any questions. I do have a little bit of information about what our current resource mix is, whatever anybody may have, but I do appreciate the time today to be able to provide this presentation.
Current resource mix is?
Yeah, so I don't have it on nameplate capacity, but I did pull from the EIA, the Energy Information Agency, for 2020, the electricity that was produced in Kentucky across the entire state for all sources was about almost 69% coal, close to 8% hydroelectric, and 22.5% natural gas. Other, I never know what other is, but other, petroleum, solar, thermal, and photovoltaic solar, biomass, and wood-derived fuels all are below 0.5% each.
Okay, thank you, Kent. One of the things that we talked about when you were talking about utilities kind of having to project 10 years out, 15 years, I think you said.
That's right.
And so some things that are really happening, I'm wondering if you're actually taking that in consideration when you're talking with utilities. There's an extreme shift or extreme push now to go with electric vehicles. And, of course, those electric vehicles, the batteries are going to have to be charged by some type of electricity supplied from something. And that everything that I'm reading and everything that I'm hearing when I'm at seminars or other events is that we probably don't have the adequacy of the grid or the adequacy of the generation to ramp up to meet that need that at the rate that people are trying to make electric vehicles happen.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak about that. That was one of the takeaways. I didn't want to get in too much detail given the time constraints, but when I was talking about modeling, especially load modeling, that's one of the key inputs and really one of the key unknowns that we don't know these days, right? What's going to be the adoption of electric vehicles generally? And then are those electric vehicle owners going to have a preference for charging at home at night? Are they going to have a preference for charging on public chargers? Are they going to have a preference to do slow charging or fast charging? I think that for at least the short-term horizon, I'd say the 5 to 10 years, we probably do have adequate generation to meet the demands, only because as electric vehicle adoption does come along, we're also still seeing reductions in demand because all of our appliances, industrial production, they're all getting much more energy efficient. And so as the demand is increasing on some sides, it's decreasing on others. Our utilities are not, I'd say, ahead of the game on distribution planning for electric vehicles. And I think a couple of the utilities have recently indicated that they're looking into it. One of the things I say that we sort of get the benefit of in Kentucky is that most of our utilities are smaller operating companies of utilities that have larger operations in other states. Thankfully, most of our utilities have had, at least in some of their other sister states, have had experience on this where they do have greater EV adoption. But it's really going to hit on the transmission and distribution system planning because especially fast chargers take a lot of demand very, very quickly, and it's pretty expensive to make those distribution upgrades.
Okay. Something else that I'm looking at, when you have a utility, and as you said earlier, a lot of their customers are demanding more renewables into the mix or whatever, and that's okay. And the utility can pretty much manage that because, I think they've traditionally had about a 15% kind of a variation where that, they were able to meet the demand if something happened and something was offline within a certain percentage, a small percentage, 15% or whatever. But as you start seeing renewables that are intermittent sources that just happen to be there when they're there, and when those intermittent sources wrap up to 30% or whatever, then it appears to me that they may have a lot tougher time guaranteeing that reliability. And is that something that the PSC looks at when you're approving their distribution or their sources, their rates, everything?
Yeah, and it's not something that, given the lack of penetration at this point, that we've had to deal with directly. I think it's a consideration that we have. And I want to go back to this slide 11. That was one of the things I mentioned, the third from the bottom, greater variability with reserve margins. And that's what you were talking about, that reserve margin, that cushion that all the utilities have. Historically, that reserve margin anywhere across the United States has been between, I'd say, probably 13 and 25%. Some utilities are given serious consideration as renewables start coming online and they're more dependent on it, especially in a lot of the other states that's been the case, of increasing that higher end reserve margin to make it, maybe 26 or make it 30%. And that's really, frankly, part of what that IRP is. Do we depend on certain types of resources that are cheaper and just have to have more of them and make that reserve margin larger? Or do we depend on something that may be more expensive but is more reliable, and so we can actually lower that reserve margin? And balancing those two sides is really where you start getting into least cost resource planning. So that's certainly something that will come up as we move forward in those integrated resource plans.
Another thing that I'm personally
up here. I went down and looked for you. Not very.
Okay. That woke everybody up. So if you were sleeping, that was for you. One of the things that I personally am concerned about is that, and we mentioned that utilities adding more renewables and that sort of thing, more intermittent sources into the mix, because those utilities, in most cases, are regulated by the Public Service Commission. And but what we're starting to see in Kentucky is a whole lot of merchant solar permits that are being asked for. That's power that's sold directly into the grid to the MISO or PJM or whatever, and Public Service Commission doesn't really have, other than the siting boards. You have, a couple of people that might be on the siting boards. You really don't have oversight over that situation, and I'm wondering, do you see that as a potential problem when, as that affects reliability, resiliency, and possibly even cost? When we have so much merchant power that's being, asked for out there.
Yeah, so I don't have a concern from the perspective of reliability. If for no other reason than, separately from those merchant generations, all of our utilities are doing their own resource adequacy. In terms of cost, one of the things that the siting board, I know I've already boarded this group with the siting board presentation a couple months ago. One of the considerations the siting board has to make when granting or denying an application is the impact of that facility on the bulk system. So that's something that's in the wheelhouse of the siting board that its determination can be made on. But with that being said, all of these merchant generators all have to conduct facility studies and different interconnection studies with the RTOs or for LG&EKU directly with their system planner. And they have to pay the entirety of the cost of system upgrades that are required for interconnecting that facility. So they can't interconnect unless there's a study that's done and said, you're going to cause, I'm getting really into the weeds here, you're going to cause a voltage violation on this specific transmission line, and it's going to cost $27 million to fix it. Unless that interconnector is willing to pay the $27 million to fix the problem that their interconnection is going to cause, they aren't allowed to interconnect. And that is a prerequisite before they're able to come online and energize and start providing that. So at this time, at these sort of levels, I don't necessarily think that's a problem. The other side of it is, I'll just real quickly, for MISO and PJM for their interconnection processes, I think that they look at all of these different projects in a serial manner, right? So they look at them by groups. So this group came first, and we're going to study those. If this group doesn't pay for that upgrade, then it's going to fall on the shoulders of the next group that impact that same facility. But they also study the second group as saying, okay, you fixed that one, but now that you fixed this one, these people coming on are going to cause another problem, and they're going to have to pay for that. With all of that being said, I don't see it as being an issue for reliability for our utilities and our customers. I do long-term see it, unless changes are made, it being an issue for those states that are depending on the markets to ensure reliability. Because I think that unless the capacity markets are appropriate and ensure that the generation is there when it's demanded, that unless there are changes made with significant additional penetrations of solar, for instance, I do think you start having reliability concerns in the 5 to 7 year time frame for those mostly those mid-Atlantic states that are leaning on the market and don't have their own generation.
Okay, and when you say they're leaning on the market, you're talking about that don't have their own generation, but are those also deregulated states, or in most cases?
That's correct. That would be your Delawares, your DCs, your Maryland, Pennsylvania, those types of states.
Okay. I think Senator Smith has a question.
Yeah, I do. First, thank you for your presentation. And just speaking about solar, I was curious how much of the solar is currently planned and pending there at the siting board. And my next question is, with that, how do you plan on integrating that into the system?
Yeah, so the integration process is what I was talking about earlier, where those interconnection studies are completed. So even before a siting board application gets filed for a new project, they file an interconnection application with either MISO or PJM or LG and EKU or TVA actually. And so those independent system planners like LG and EKU have to turn over that types of system planning to an outside entity, someone that's independent, unbiased. So those system planners are looking at the integration into what's the impact to the transmission system in terms of what the impact to the IRP is, except for transmission constraints, which may show up in an integrated resource plan. Those sort of planning operations are taken care of at the wholesale level.
I guess to follow up, just for me to process it from just a senator, and certainly not in that field, but it sounds to me like we're not really sure. I mean, that how this thing's going to go forward, and you've got to study for it, and you've got other protocols to follow, but that doesn't seem like a very clear path where we're at. So there's still a lot of unknowns. Is that safe to say?
So I'll say it this way. Across, let's say, the Eastern Interconnect, from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean, minus Texas, because Texas is always the exception when it comes to all these things. There are massive backlogs in these they're called generation interconnection queues. Tons and tons of generators are filing applications. Sometimes you'll have a single entity that needs to sell and build and sell, may already have a contract for it, but may need to build and sell 100 megawatts of solar. They're going to put in 5, 7, 10 applications to figure out which one of them is the cheapest. So when you talk about unknowns, truly a very small percentage of those things, those applications that are filed, are actually going to move forward in the planning process. So there is a significant unknown there.
Well, if I may follow up, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
Obviously this is a big issue, and there's so much that's changing across Kentucky, and we're seeing a lot of developments in different rural pockets now where things like Core Scientific, biofuels, other places are creeping up and chasing the crypto mining, the blockchain asset for the data centers, and I'm sure that's probably a lot to handle because these things are power hungry. I mean, they will take as many megawatts as you can generate, and our state's been inundated with all these Chinese investors and Russian investors and people that want to come in. They're speculators, but what I believe is most important for Kentucky, because we're so positioned to become a tech giant in the nation, that if our hash rate, just straight up talking about how it works, if our hash rate is high enough that puts Kentucky out there above other states, there'll be no slowing us down. So the economic development for Kentucky is different in the sense of that because we are a power state like we are, we have opportunities that maybe Texas and a few other states have, but how we handle that's going to change the entire scope of places like Eastern Kentucky, Western Kentucky, to where they will become the new tech giants of the United States. And you're already seeing partnerships with global companies in these rural areas, and every bit of its power. I mean, I don't care if you're talking about Bitcoin, blockchain, Dogecoin, or whatever you want to call it. All those things are measurements of electricity, of power that's generated. So getting this thing right is vital. Make sure that the Public Service Commission is working with, and it's fluid with our industries and our utilities, that they're able to move forward at the speed of business to deploy these so we don't lose them. There's not a lot out there that can slow Kentucky down unless we just are not able to provide it due to regulation or because we've closed so much down, we're not able to do the affordability. So I say as we go forward, we need to be cautious about this because our future can shift at this point in a way we've never had that opportunity before. Sorry to be so long, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Well, and one of the things that to follow up on that, when I came here about 27 years ago, Kentucky had probably the second or third lowest utility rates in the nation, electricity rates. Now I don't think we're even in the top 10. We're somewhere pretty close, but I don't know if you know exactly where we are.
Not by year, but we're relative to everybody else. We're doing fairly well on the actual rate. That's right for residential and industrial, certainly. Yeah.
So we just want to make sure that we maintain that. Representative Fugate has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple questions. Since the closing of the coal-powered plant in East Kentucky, our people have experienced higher rates on their electricity. So, question for you: when Kentucky Power sold out or in the process of selling out to another company, does the PSC have to approve that?
Yes. So I was hoping I wouldn't get this question, only because I do anticipate sending a letter to this committee, this interim committee, as well as to the Kentucky Power delegation, sort of explaining what that process will be. So there are a couple of things that will have to happen. I'd be happy to talk to you about it in detail, but at a very high level, Kentucky Power will have to seek Public Service Commission approval in order to transfer their assets and be sold. And they'll also have to go to that federal commission and get approval, not just for the transfer, but there will also be, I'm going to be surprised if there's not a half a dozen things that they have to request at the federal level in order for that sale to go through and that transfer to occur.
Okay, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just a couple more questions. So if it is approved and this new company buys it, will they sell it for a profit? And if they do sell it for a profit, I'm sure, or they wouldn't sell it, will the customers have to absorb that profit that the company made? Is the customers who already have had an increase of a pretty good percentage in a place where our jobs are not like they should be, are they going to have to absorb that difference in our pay rates? I mean, in our electrical rates, there's talk of a 30% hike, and I know that that's just talk. Maybe it's not. But if you could just shed some light on, because I'm getting a lot of questions and feedback on that.
Yeah, I don't want to be this person. I can't speak specifically to this transaction just because it will come in front of us for ultimate approval. I can speak about different transfers that have occurred across the state that I've been around. I've seen a handful, let's say, over the past 5 or 6 years. Almost all of them include what's referred to, you're saying, overpay, an acquisition premium. I'm unaware. I'll just say I'm unaware of any instance in which the Public Service Commission has allowed customers of a sold electric utility to have to bear the burden of that acquisition premium.
Well, and I think that in the past, when the coal-fired plant was shut down, and they acquired a natural gas generator over in West Virginia, I think it is, that I think the customers had to bear the burden of that.
Yeah, so
because they raised the rates, or they came to the Public Service Commission to get a rate increase because of their acquisition of this new generation. So, just speaking from East Kentucky, they're about to break the donkey's back down in East Kentucky, and we can't afford, our people cannot afford another 25 or 30% hike on our electrical rates.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to tell you, I'm unaware of any. I'm unaware of any proposed increase. I'll be the first to tell you, unless somebody just forgot to tell me about it, which I find hard to believe. I'm unaware of any proposed increase. That's the first thing, and I appreciate the comments. So Kentucky Power did retire in 2012. They decided to retire the Big Sandy plant there in East Kentucky, and they the basis for it. I wasn't around then. The basis for it was that the environmental compliance cost was going to be more expensive than it would be to go buy just a whole new power plant. And that's effectively what they did. They went and bought half of a power plant in West Virginia, retired that Big Sandy plant, and then either immediately before or immediately after that, refueled the other Big Sandy plant. There was another power plant at Big Sandy that they still own, and they converted that to a natural gas plant. But I'd be happy to try to answer any questions I can sort of offline, but I'm unaware of any proposed increases.
But if the new company, obviously, if they pay an extra for it, they'll come to you with a new rate increase, and ultimately probably you'll see that probably in the future.
Yeah, so I don't know if they'll I have no idea whether they'll propose anything, but what I can say is they can't increase rates without coming to us first.
Right. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith, did you have something else?
Yeah, no, I just kind of want to echo what Representative Fugit had said about the transition that's pending out there, because it's not finished yet, and a great many of our businesses and citizens are curious about exactly what's going to happen as this goes through and who our new partner may be and what the fallout. But how we got here was the issue that got us here was money, and an amount of money that was really at a point of it not being recoverable. So when this deal transpires, somebody's probably going to have to eat that. I think our concern is that going to be taken care of and settled up inside this transaction, or is the transaction going to be taking place and then that's going to be transferred to the general public and the businesses to pick that up? Because if it's what I think it is, I don't know, like Representative Fugit said, that you're going to be able to absorb that realistically in the region without tipping the scales of causing us to lose new industry we just certainly got in. So, I mean, I'm just one of the firm believers that we cannot ration our way with power to prosperity, that the more energy you have, the more prosperity you have. And I say, hammer down, we've got it. Kentucky's known for it. If we, the government, could get out of the way and let them do their job over there, I think that the industry in Kentucky would be twice probably what it is now. But I do caution us as we go forward that as that deal, whatever happens with it, that the fact of tipping the scales there with these increases in utility could be catastrophic for new businesses that just came in.
Thanks, Mr. Smith. I think Representative Miles is online and has a question.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. We've heard from multiple directions of the PSC is understaffed right now. Can you address that a little bit? Because I know everyone wants you all to have quick turnaround on things, but do you all have adequate staff to be able to comply with quicker turnarounds?
No. And I don't mean to be flippant, Commissioner Miles, Representative Miles. I really don't. But I just want to be honest. We do not. We do have. I was speaking to a commissioner the other day that actually had spent 2 stints at the Public Service Commission as well as some time on FERC. Her comment to me when she asked me how many people we had, her initial reaction was we had twice that many when I was there. We don't necessarily have more cases than we used to. It's fairly flat. The complexity of cases is much higher than it used to be. I'd love to come in one time and provide a presentation, Chairman, on this issue if you ever have time. I'll bring in an entire case record with me for one of the rate cases. Some of these run 10, 20, 30,000 pages. We have, of the approximately 70 employees we probably only have 30 or 35 that actively work on cases. The rest are, doing different things that we need day to day. That we have that many people to end up maybe a quarter of those work on a rate case and 3 commissioners, and we're supposed to, be able to roll on a 30,000 page case that has to begin and end within 6 months from the day that was filed. So the answer is no. I think if you ask the investor-owned utilities and the rural electric cooperatives, we probably move too slow. If you ask the water districts, we probably move a little too fast. So I'm happy to make anybody we can. I'm happy to have the conversation on that. But today we don't have the current resources we need to do our current work. That was before all these solar siting cases came. That was before all the ARPA money, and now likely the infrastructure money will be here. We're going to have a lot of certificate of public convenience and necessities from our rural water utilities. Our sewer utilities need to come in and build things. After they build it, they're going to need to come in and change their rates. We have to do those as well. All at the same time that our investor-owned utilities have rate cases 2 to 3 times more often than they used to. So it's adding up, and we have less and less people every day. And frankly, if it wasn't for a dedicated staff of the folks that we have, I don't know how we would get orders out on time as it is.
Thank you for sharing, and I just wanted to kind of bring that to the attention because I have been aware from multiple avenues that was going on. So if there's any guidance of how we can help you, please let us know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to make it quick. Thank you for your presentation. Chairman Gooch asked about electric vehicles. We're obviously making a big move in that direction, and I believe your answer is we are ready 5 years from now. But what about 10 years from now? What suggestions do you have to be sure that we're ready for a quick transition to electric vehicles?
Yeah, so a few of our utilities have already started thinking about this. So LG&E and KU have already started talking about electric vehicles. So is Duke in Northern Kentucky. I believe that AEP, the current parent company of Kentucky Power, I think Duke, LG and KU have all joined in on this multi-state effort to start looking at electric vehicle charging stations across a wider territory, start looking at distancing and impact. I think that what, speaking for myself, my preference would be that this be a bigger issue in those integrated resource plans, because you're going to have to plan the transmission to distribution system completely differently now that you're adding these significant increases in demand in discrete areas on the system. I'm a little less worried about electric vehicles in terms of personal vehicles, just because you know where they're going to be, right? And you know they're going to be incremental, but each one's not going to push you over the top on anything. It's not going to make you one more addition's not going to make you have to go get a new transformer. My biggest concern on electric vehicles is fleet electrification. Are people like UPS or garbage carriers, delivery trucks, right? People that stay within a certain defined area, that all of a sudden you have an entire Amazon hub that decides to electrify their van fleet. And all of a sudden you're going to have, within a year's time period, go from having whatever the building is using as being the demand of that area to now you're going to need to charge 40 vans overnight from 0 to 100. Those are the types of things, those sort of upgrades to the transmission and distribution system to accommodate that increase in demand is actually really what worries me the most on electric vehicle and transportation electrification.
Okay. Finally, I have a question. I was Senator Smith and I are on the Southern States Energy Board, and I was in September. I was in Oklahoma City, and they talked a lot about what happened with last year with the polar vortex that happened that hit Oklahoma as well as Texas. We're not going to talk too much about Texas, other than to say they came very close. I've heard as little as 4 hours with totally losing their entire electric grid. And even in a situation where they just had some blackouts, at least 200 people died. Some estimates as much that it could have been as many as 700 people. So what can happen? It shows that people will die when you have those types of brownouts, blackouts, and outages. I heard the governor of Oklahoma actually tell a group of high school kids that they were within a few hours there of actually not being able to watch TikTok videos for 2 or 3 weeks, and their minds were almost blown. It's like, how could something like that happen? But it can. And in the Oklahoma situation, what they told us there is, of course, at one time they had a pretty good mix of coal, but they have actually they have a lot of wind, and they were currently getting about 40% of their electricity from wind. And they get about 40% from natural gas. They were getting about 10% from coal and the other 10 or so percent from others. And when that fog happened, they had freezing fog that actually froze the windmills up to where they would not turn. And then you had situations where the a lot of the gas wellheads froze up. And that 10% of their capacity that they had from coal was able to ramp up to about 53%, and actually save them and prevent them from losing their entire grid and that sort of thing. But my question is, when we are allowing all these other sources to be bought first, we're demanding that when they are available that they're bought. That's taking, I guess, money away from some of the other systems. How can we maintain that coal fleet for backup, that baseload generation, when they're only selling in a market at 10%. How are they able to winterize and do the upgrades and that sort of thing? And even beyond that, there's a concerted effort out there to completely shut those down. And I just want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so
on that.
I don't want to pretend like I have all the answers. I'm gonna pretend like I have all the answers, but I really don't. So one of the things that would have helped is a capacity market, is paying somebody enough to stay open, even if they're not selling electricity on any given day. SPP, which is on the other side of MISO, another RTO. I'll go to that map here in a second. SPP does not have a capacity market. PJM and MISO both do. MISO was sending power to SPP. PJM was sending power to MISO so they could then send it to SPP. PJM exported an extra 13,000 megawatts at any given time to MISO so they could then send more 1,000 megawatts to SPP. The fact that in these RTO areas, you need to have either great markets or state regulators that are staying up. You are having in some of these markets, particularly MISO, you're having states that think in the short term it's cheaper if we just lean on the market for resource adequacy. Almost every single jurisdiction, every state in MISO is vertically integrated in Kentucky, but some of their utilities, some of their states are just saying, as long as we can meet the minimum for MISO, that's good enough. And to me, it's really trying to do it on the cheap in the short term, and I think ultimately it does lead to reliability issues in the long term. I'm heavily involved. I try to stay very involved in PJM issues. PJM as a management has no interest in letting the generation that they know is required for reliability to retire and not have reliability generation come on behind it. I have an expectation that they'll continue to fortify the capacity market so that those generators that are needed to meet that 1 hour peak demand make enough so that they can stick around when they're actually needed the most.
Well, and I agree with you, but I think that means that we have to understand and actually realize how important it is, and as you say, possibly invest in keeping those markets open, because even if we shut those down, as you said, a lot of them they're not, they still have years of life expectancy left. They have legacy cost, and we'll be paying that legacy cost if we were to shut them down, and then we wouldn't have the reliability. So let's go ahead and pay that now to make sure that they're able to operate even when they're not selling electricity. I think that's where we have to go, and I certainly agree with that. And thank you so much for your presentation today. It's been very informative, and I think, as you can see from the questions in the committee, we're very much interested in your presentation, and we appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you all for having me.
Yes, sir. I want to recognize we have a new committee member today, and she's the prettiest girl on the committee. So anyway, Senator Smith, would you introduce our newest committee member?
Yes, our new committee member is Kipling Keats, and she's here today keeping an eye on everybody here to make sure that we get good power rates in Kentucky, right, Kip?
All right. Well, that's great. Thank you so much. Okay, the next item on the agenda is advanced notification of natural gas transmission pipeline location. And we have Representative D.J. Johnson, Bob Babbage, and are here to enlighten us. I assume that we may be having a bill or some discussion in when the session comes up. Correct. Okay. Oh, and there is a packet and a draft in your members' folders. Thank you. Introduce yourself for the record, please, and you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is D.J. Johnson, State Representative for the 13th District in Kentucky.
Bob Babbage, co-founder, representing TC Energy, intern to D.J. Johnson.
Right.
Okay, make sure your mic's on.
Well, we'll do that. So, again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to come before you and discuss some legislation that we are preparing to deal with the concern about advanced notification of transmission pipelines and their locations. And we're going to work on the technical stuff here. We've got a couple of slides for you, but we won't take real long about that. So more specifically, what we're here to talk about is the challenges that are growing as new development, both residential and commercial, expand out into areas that were once open fields effectively, and which is where we put pipeline transmission lines so that we can be away from developments and communities, but at the same time serve those communities. And as development grows, we're getting closer and closer to those pipelines, and that's what this bill is going to address, is the notification process when that happens. I will say this is not a standalone effort in Kentucky. Tennessee last year passed a bill very similar, almost identical to the language we have in the bill that we will propose unanimously. So it was not a very contradictory bill. And at the same time, Ohio is working on the same language that we're working on right now. So this is not just a local situation; it's a regional concern. In fact, it's a national concern. This issue has been talked about for about a decade now, and out of those conversations, that's how we've come to the legislation that we're proposing today. So with that, I'll start off with a little bit of background, and we'll start with the fact that currently our Commonwealth has about 6,500 miles of transmission pipelines, national transmission pipelines, in our state. And we're going to show a couple of maps just to kind of give you a picture of it. This is the transmission pipeline map for the country itself. And this shows the state of Kentucky. And if you look at this, basically, if you think about from sources down in the central south parts of the country, Texas, Louisiana, up to the northeast where there's a high demand, you can't get there without going through us, basically. And that's what these maps are showing. Kentucky is a major conduit for that path. This shows just a little bit more of a regional inside the state, central Kentucky. Here's an idea of the pipelines. And if you think about the communities in those areas as we look at these maps, you'll see that these pipelines really do impact almost every community in the state. Here we're looking at eastern Kentucky, probably our most condensed location for pipelines. Go ahead. And then I'm from the 13th district, so we had to throw in and show in the Owensboro area. And we have pipelines in Owensboro too. In fact, western Kentucky is a pretty major route for these pipelines. So that's just to give you kind of a pictorial look at what we're dealing with, and just the fact that it affects the entire state. So, as I said, pipelines have historically been intentionally routed away from major communities, but at the same time close enough so that they could serve those communities. But as we are aware, these communities are growing, and as they grow and expand, they're expanding into these locations that the pipelines are already existing. So, when that happens, the pipelines are actually identified by category, by level, and it's based upon the population density, and it involves safety and operation and maintenance and that sort of things. So as pipelines were put in previously, they were put in very low density areas, but as expansion is happening, those low density areas are becoming high density areas, and it's requiring pipeline operators to modify their pipelines, modify their maintenance, their operations procedures based upon what level or category they're in at that moment. So those categories change, their operations change. And often what happens is that a developer or a landowner will come up with a new use for a particular piece of land that's close to a pipeline, and they are required to notify the pipeline transmission owner, the operator, when they're doing that, but there's no real formalized process for exactly when that should happen and how it should happen. And this bill basically in its summation is an effort to identify procedures that involve the landowners and the developers with planning commissions and the pipeline owners, so that they're all going to talk together and talk as early as possible so that we can identify maybe potential issues with what the pipeline's going to have to do to modify, or if you flip it the other way, what developers would like to know about a pipeline that they're thinking about developing into that area that might be a safety concern that they wouldn't have otherwise known about. So this bill very specifically is about communications. It's about advance notification as early as possible in the process. And I think without getting into the specifics of the bill by language, I'm just going to say that that's what this bill does. It provides a process for landowners and developers to talk with planning commissions and in turn talking with the pipeline owners. It requires the pipeline owners to be talking to the developers, and all of this happens at an earlier point than it's happening these days. And I will just defer to Bob at this point. Is there anything I haven't covered about it, or did I hit the big points? Anything you would like to add?
Yes, sir. I'd like to thank Mr. Herman for drafting this for you and just the excellent work LRC has done, and appreciate the effort you've made over the course of the last year to address this issue. It is important, and it's something we can do, especially learning from Tennessee and now watching the Ohio process as well. All three of these states are doing essentially the same thing.
Correct. So with that, that was a brief overview. I didn't want to keep us forever, but I'd be glad to entertain any questions that the committee might have.
Any questions? Senator Whale.
I answered either. What if there's a dispute or an issue arises that they can't agree or the talking doesn't come out well?
Do you want to just take that one, or do you want me to take it? It's a good question.
I get my constituent up here.
We have an excellent guest expert.
Thank you. You want to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Aaron Thompson with TC Energy with our State Government and Community Relations Department from Greenup County, so one of Senator Webb's constituents. The way that the bill actually works is there just is a provision in there whenever it's actually submitted to the Regional Planning Commission just to say that that communication occurred. There's no any type of authority to prevent that. It's just to make sure that that communication effort actually happened.
That's the way I read it, and I just wanted to make sure, and it's good to see Aaron. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. We look forward to hearing this bill. I'm sure it'll come before this committee during this session. So.
I will finish, Mr. Chairman, with this, that this is a work in progress. We think we've got good language. Again, it's the same language that's being done in Tennessee and Ohio, but at the same time, we're open to conversations. We want to make sure that it's the best possible bill we can get. It hasn't been filed yet. So if there's any input anyone would like to provide to us, we would be glad to hear from you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next we have a discussion of water permits and certifications issued by the Energy and Environment Cabinet. I'm sure they have someone online.
Chairman Gooch, my name's Tony Hatton. I'm Commissioner of Department for Environmental Protection. Hope you're doing well today. Welcome to you and all the members of the committee.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe the committee had sent you some questions or something, or you have a presentation for us.
I don't have a presentation. The committee did send us some questions, and we forwarded back a response to the committee's questions on the 4th of November.
Okay, let's go ahead and just, for the committee members who may not have seen that, can you just go through that list?
Well, I think there might have, I'm not 100% sure, Chairman Gooch, I think there were some questions raised in particular about review times for energy-related water permits and coal-related water permits. Of course, at any given time, we have a significant number of permits in the agency to review. Permitting programs are, in large part, they're not paint by numbers, but they certainly have rails within which all the participants need to stay. And so to a degree, they are sort of established programs, but there are specific cases and specific permits that might in particular be more complicated than others. When I look at the data that I got from the Division of Water, when we're looking at energy related permits, we don't have any permits that are outside of our review time frames as we supply to the committee. Also, when it comes to coal-related water permits, we do have one permit that is significantly beyond the review timeframes. That's a very complicated permit where there are a couple of other permits that need to be requested and obtained prior to a water quality permit. being issued. It's there's some details to that one, and I would certainly, if there's any particular interest on anyone's behalf in the on the committee, I'd be more than glad to have a detailed conversation about that particular permit. But of those several permits, we have that one that exceeds regulatory timeframes. We had one that was 2 days over regulatory timeframes, but we just sent out a public notice on a draft permit. So, lots of questions. We get lots of questions. If the reality of it is in the agency, we do a lot of things other than issue permits, but permits, by and large, are seen as the product that we have to produce, and we're very cognizant of that, and we work very hard to do that. And I think by and large, based on the information we forwarded you, we're keeping pace with our workload on energy-related permits and coal permits, as we are the other significant amount of industrial wastewater permits that we review. But basically, what the agency's overall priority here or responsibility is that we are an authorized state under the Clean Water Act. EPA oversees our program. So when there's a discharge at a mining operation or at a coal-fired utility or any other type of industrial operation that discharges to the waters of the Commonwealth, we're responsible for making sure that those discharges meet the standards set forth in EPA and state law. And then in some cases, in particular types of projects where you're going to be moving a lot of dirt, dredging and filling surface waters, it also requires a core permit, a 404 permit, which is sometimes a very lengthy process to get that permit, and a state water quality certification to go along with it. So again, that's pretty much my understanding of some of the questions the committee may have had, and I'd be glad to try to clarify anything I might have said that's not clear or answer any related questions you all might have.
I think Senator Smith has some more specific questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. Thank you for making the presentation today. I don't read, but I've got a number of these that I've kind of gone back to look at, because speed of deployment, being able to make sure that our industries, whether it's been coal or any other industry, that they have a timeline. If you're going to build a house or a building or develop something, you've got a list of people you have to go through to do it, and you've got a timeline. Well, in coal and other industries here, a lot of times there's not a timeline. But here's just one that I think should concern most of the members in this room, and I've got several others to kind of go through it, and they bother me. But this individual says they have the Kdps permit was under review since the renewal process of December 2019. They put it on public notice September 2021, nearly 2 years later. This delay has cost this particular company thousands of dollars because they have to monitor it, have lab fees, the excessive time that they have to do in the monitoring, and would not have been necessary if the permit had been renewed in a timely manner as it should have been. This is still not issued because now the EPA has requested an extension to review it after 2 years. This group is ready to move 2 ponds that they finished in this area mining 2 years ago, and they're ready to do their stuff. It's us that hadn't been able to get it done, but the DNR will not approve the pond removal request because now the Division of Water has not issued the KDES renewal. So the permit expired on 4/31/2020, and this is not a typo. The renewable application was submitted in December of 2019. The new KDS permit application that I'm talking about has been submitted since late of May 2021, and all the fees were paid in early June, and there's not even been a reviewer assigned to it. Now, this is the type of stuff that causes Kentucky, to take a pause and wonder, why. Now, 3 years ago, we put a bill in front of this committee to ask this agency and others to give us a standard of practice, something that we could show industry. We want you guys to do the job, and we want you to do it by law, and you follow these steps, and you'll be able to get your permit in a timely manner. I, as a business person and as a senator, cannot get my mind around that, and I've got other ones. Now, I know that they were talking about a backlog and can't get things done, but I've been here long enough to remember when we asked the coal companies to pony up more money in fees so we could hire more workers to go over there to do more 404 permits. And my question is, I don't have any coal mines left. We closed almost 800 coal mines in 3 years, and we've got more employees than we've ever had. and we're having a backlog. So honestly, I really need for somebody to help walk me through what's going on over there, because I think we need answers. We need to know why we've got renewals that haven't been done for 2 years. So I'll turn it over.
Senator Smith, Senator Smith, I'm sorry if I interrupted.
Please go ahead.
I would be more than glad to have a conversation with you about specific permits that you're having issues and concerns with. I'd be more than glad to do that, because I do understand the necessity for timeliness in obtaining permits that you need to conduct business. There may be a lot of details that I'm not aware of right now, but I would be more than glad to discuss specifics with you, and then I can have conversations with the Division of Water to try to ascertain why some of these renewals may be taking the period of time that you've indicated. I'd be glad to do that.
Well, here's the tough part is a lot of us have been here for a while, and we've watched the transition, the change. We've been here since we used to have SCOPO, a Small Coal Operators Association, because we had so many small coal mines in there that they had a group, and even had an office in Lexington. And I remember this, and then I remember how many employees were over there then, the work we had. And now we're down to, I'm not sure how many coal mines I've got. I think I've got 3 active ones in my area. And these guys are fighting. There's a little bit of a coal boom going on right now. And we've got a real opportunity for people to pick up jobs that are good paying jobs. And these companies can't even get their renewables. Now, I know there's a lot of reasons for this or that, but I can tell you, we need answers. We need to do a better decision process so that we are able to help companies and foster a better environment for these people to be able to keep these people employed and take advantage of this coal boom. Now, I've looked through this. I've been here for almost 20 years, and this one right here makes no sense to me. I've got a couple other ones, but it's a shell game. A lot of the newer members don't realize the shell game of how these stack these down and wait for one agency to do it, and then you'll drag your feet on these other ones. So if your policy really wasn't pro-energy, you can use this structure to drag a company out to where you either break them or make it so expensive that it's not worth mining the property. Now, I'm not saying that's what happens here, but it's happened in the past before. But we really this committee needs to be very serious about putting forth laws that make this stuff streamlined, that these companies can mine and know that if they're doing their stuff and they're paying their fees, that they don't have to wait 2 years and still not even have a reviewer. So I'm asking you to help us come up with some kind of a solution. I'm asking you to report back to this committee. We can talk about the details of these hypothetically, but I would like for somebody to explain to me how this has happened several times, and we're going to look at laws that stop this from happening. These people spend a lot of money in this state, and we need to be able to tell them, if you're a legitimate, good faith player, you're paying your bills, you don't have the violations, you can get your permit in 6 months, or you can get your permit in 3 months, like other industries. This has gone on too long, and I really, really encourage this committee to give this industry a timeline like we do other industries. Thank you.
Well, I would hope that in some of the specific instances that Senator Smith, and if I have some, that we will reach out to you personally and look at these. But I know that we want to make sure that Kentucky is a business-friendly state, and there are times I know that I've passed laws and then for whatever reason, someone in one of the cabinets would just kind of drag those things out to the point where the law ended up having no effect because, I had one case where we passed a law that would actually give incentives for power plants to build on a coal mine site. We did that in 2000, and we applied for Peabody Energy applied for a permit in Kentucky right after that law was passed. And 6 months later, they were running into more and more problems. And 6 months later, Peabody applied for a permit in Illinois to build a Prairie State power plant. And of course, the one in Kentucky was called Thoroughbred. And finally, they gave up on the building the plant in Kentucky, and they built the one in Illinois. And that plant in Illinois was selling power to two Kentucky cities, Paducah and Princeton. And, that was Illinois jobs, Illinois coal. And, we just want to make sure that that's not happening. And when it does happen, then, we have no choice but to try to do legislative solutions. So we appreciate you being here. And
Senator Gooch, Representative Gooch, can I make one statement, please,
sure.
sir? I want to make sure that the committee understands that within the Department of Environmental Protection, we are a technical program. There's also policy and legal concerns with everything we do, but there is no way, shape, form, or fashion, at least on part of the Department of Environmental Protection, any concerted efforts to slow down or backlog permits. I know that there's frustration. I know that it's a very convoluted process. And I would really appreciate the opportunity to hear more details about particular permits you think may have issues you have concerns about, so that I will know exactly what those are, so that I can address any of those issues that might be within the Department for Environmental Protection.
Okay, we would certainly would welcome that. And Senator Smith may have a follow-up comment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the offer for that, and I would encourage you to maybe look at where you see chances for us to improve the speed of deployment for this. You've been around this stuff. You can see how things can get lost, how things can get. One of the cases in here when we called over to find out why it had not been issued because it had been paid. I'm not kidding you. The lady told me that she didn't realize it was on her desk, and she found it was on her desk. It had been paid, and she'd get right to it. It had been sitting there for 2 months. Now that's the type of stuff that is frustrating for us. We're senators and representatives. We understand bureaucracy probably as good as about anybody. But we need to do better here. We need to have a timeline. And so you can help us do that. You know the inside of the industry. We know the legislative process between the two of us. We ought to be able to tell these people, you can get this in 30 days. And if you can't, we should be able to quantify why they can't. But it would help the members, if you want to give us a timeline or how it lays out to help all the members understand the processes that it goes through, we welcome you to bring that to us for our next meeting or the very first meeting we have as the General Assembly convenes. But we have got to come up with some formula that makes sense in this industry. In our lifetime, there's not been one that I can find, but I think they deserve it, just like the construction industry or the automobile industry or anybody else. We need to give this timeline some numbers. But thank you, and I welcome your input on that.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah, if you can find some things that we need to do to change some laws or whatever, we'd be happy to work with you. So appreciate you being here today.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Next on the agenda, we have there was a report. It's on the use of energy efficiency measures in state government, and it was due this year, and we do have that report. It's available online. So if anybody wants to go online and look at that, it doesn't require any actions on this committee. And then there are some administrative regulations. Most of these, I think all of them, apply to fish and wildlife. A lot of them are just renewals that they have to do so often. If they don't renew them, these regulations, then they I guess sunset or whatever. Some have had some minor corrections. The one that is probably the one that is a little bit bigger is 301 KR 001 :1522, and that's a proposed resolution talking about the harvest and sale of Asian carp. And for most of you in West Kentucky know Asian carp is a really serious problem. And so anyway, these don't require any actions, but I wanted to make the members aware that these are on the committee and will go into effect today. So any questions on any of them? Seeing none, okay. I think finally, before we adjourn, Representative Wesley, I think wants to make some comments to the committee.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to address someone that's here right now, and I believe in honoring people, and so we have a special person that's here today, and we would just like to address and how proud we are of them and the service that they have gave, not only on this committee but also their district. I have a little list that I'd like to read, Mr. Chairman, if that's all right.
Sure.
This person, they're an insurance agent. They belong to the Providence Baptist Church. They used to be the mayor in their city. They've been on this council for 26 years, or as a representative, I should say. And I'm not going to read all this because it's like a book, what they have in their life of their past history. But we have a small gift that we would just like to show our appreciation of them. So if we can ask that little princess to come over here, little Kipling. And we would like to just give you this, Mr. Chairman. We appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
So this is just a small gift that we got you, and so we just wanted to show our appreciation to you and thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm kind of speechless. I think that's why you did that, so you'd finally catch me speechless. But thank you, I appreciate that so very much. All right, appreciate it. And I'll open it in a minute. But we have something else I want to announce today too, and it's I'm kind of sad. This person has worked for this committee for a long time, has done a great job as a CSA, and most of you know Janine Coy. She, I think, is leaving us, and she's going to go to be the CSA of the Economic Development Committee. So we are so sorry that you're going to be leaving us, but I'm on that other committee, so I'm sure I look forward to working with you there. So let's give. That's right. You can't get away. That's right. I know that was your attempt, but you can't get away. So let's give her a great round of applause. Thank you. Not going to blow up, is it?
No, sir. I would like to say that Chairman Gooch has been a state representative for 26 years, I believe.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So we just appreciate what you have done.
Thank you so much. We were actually in Tampa, and I had seen this there, right? And yeah, that's right. Well, thank you so much. I wouldn't want to break it. So anyway, it's a very nice. Awesome. Okay, thank you. The